What is likely Blizzard to do with the class changes, nerfs and buffs this week? Hey guys, Petko here, welcome for another video, or as always, welcome to Bingo Tuesday. I know a lot of you guys have requested this, and I've done this experimentally last week where we tried to guess the class changes coming out next week, and we actually did pretty successful one. I think we guessed roughly 70% give or take of what we mapped here. So today, I've prepared at least for this week, or between the 14th and 17th of July, what I believe are the most likely scenario of them doing following the new PTR build that is coming out hopefully today. If not today, then the next couple of days. Now, why am I so confident about a PTR build? Because they have confirmed to us that every single week from now on until the release of the season, we don't know when it's going to be, which is going to be, I mean, we think it's going to be 18th of August. We are getting class changes, which means 5 weeks in a row at least. Every week, there will be something coming out. Okay. Let's talk about it and what do I think. Starting first from Prot Evoker, I think Prot Evoker is likely to see another round of changes, and this time around only focusing on the HPS profile. I feel like they currently are dominating the raid, and do keep in mind Blizzard loves to tweak things about raiding, at least in the first handful of weeks. I think for Mythic Plus they also look pretty solid, but not broken. But for raiding right now, they look to be dominating the HPS ladder, so I wouldn't be surprised if they do get a small HPS nerf. I think Vengeance DH is likely not going to get any changes. I think their current performance so far in Mythic Plus is a solid. Unfortunately, nobody comes close to Prot Paladin, hence why I feel like once they do nerf Prot Paladin, then they're going to eye out exactly how each class compares to another and then do the adjustments if needed. But for now, I think Vengeance is probably safe, at least for this week. Sub-Rogue buffs. Now, last week we spoke about Sub-Rogue and why do I think they deserve the buff. They put a Uno reverse card and they instead nerfed Sub-Rogue, which I believe it might have been a mistake because Sub-Rogue was already performing pretty bad in raid, and in Mythic Plus they were doing below average damage. So them getting an 8% nerf while other classes that were a lot better than them got a buff made no sense. I honestly believe that was an honest mistake. So I wouldn't be surprised to see a large buff coming to Sub-Rogue, maybe something between like a 15 to 20% aura buffs in the next couple of weeks, or maybe small buffs every single week to make it up to par with the rest of the specs. We shall see. Resto Druid. Okay, so I have wrote bonus points bingo guesses here. I think there's like 4 of them. So it's because it's very specific buff that I'm fishing for. I fish for a rake buff on Resto Druid, and I've explained to you guys exactly why do I think rake buff is needed. The mass AoE on Resto Druid feels pretty good, especially outside of cities. They have prior target damage, they have funnel damage. Their ST is not crazy, but it's not really bad. The problem is with Resto Druid, every time you fight low amount of targets, what I mean like, let's say 2 to 5 targets, 2 to 6 targets, actually up to 5, your damage is just not good. So having a buffed rake would induce you using, for example, infected claws plus double claw rake. I think you were already using double infected claws, I believe, which made you rake do more damage, and double rake claw, whatever it's called, make your rake to duplicate. I think if they buff general damage of rake by like at least 30 to 40%, that's gonna make you damage a lot better in these scenarios where it's like, you know, smaller mobs. Also, rake is a very iconic ability, so it makes no sense for you to ignore it. Yeah, that's about it. Ret Paladin. Now, why do you think Ret Paladin is gonna get buffed? So I'm going here by intuition and logic. I think Ret Paladin is by far the most played spec, and naturally they don't want to have Ret Paladin, you know, being dog shit, because a lot of people will be disappointed. So the current performance of Ret Paladin is like mid-performer. The problem is they're using a broken trinket on PTR, all the Retribution Paladin called Marekta's Fang, which is a channel unused trinket, which does roughly around 10 to 15% of your overall damage. It all depends on the amount of mobs you're fighting. So I'm really, if you don't play this trinket, I think your performance just becomes just, you know, an average performer. So I wouldn't be surprised to see a tiny buff coming for Ret Paladin, but also I wouldn't be surprised if they don't get anything. So either way, I'm gonna go for a buff for now. Unholy DK tier set. Okay, so I know DK got nerfed last week, and those nerfs were substantial, but I feel like Unholy DK will get another nerf. And this time around on their tier set, I think their tier set is overperforming, and it's always going to end up being the #1 source of damage, which I'm pretty sure Blizzard does not want them that to happen, okay? So what I expect to happen here is maybe this week to get a tier set nerf, and then compensation buffs after that to adjust for lack of damage after the nerf of tier set. You know, kind of a bonus point and it's very specific niche, but I'm pretty confident I'll get at some point during PTR. Hope to see it this week. Aff Lock single target buffs. Okay, so what I expect first to happen is the 4-piece. If you guys didn't know, your Seed of Corruption applies Unstable Affliction on a target, which again right now is currently bugged out. It's supposed to do 20% of the Unstable Affliction damage, but it does 100%. Okay, so pretty much you are using Seed on pure single target, which is something that it will never allow this. So what I expect here to happen is that 4-piece to get hotfix, the tier set, and instead to get a compensation single target buffs by buffing Unstable Affliction by XYZ percentage. Maybe like 25 would be ideal. 20-25 would be good. A bit of a Drain Soul buff as well, wouldn't mind that, or Shadow Bolt buff to induce more usage of it. Overall, I think the AoE is already solid there for Aff. Next one is Outlaw Rogue buffs. Honestly, once again, Outlaw feels pretty good to play. Rotational feels quite fun. It's just underperforming, so an aura buff here would be great. Maybe like a small bump. Prot Paladin nerfs, I don't need to say anything in regards to this. You guys already know. Prot Paladin is busted. It does the damage of regular DPS. That shit's getting nerfed. Any nerf below 30%, you guys are lucky. Okay? I think 30% nerf is the minimum what they're aiming for Paladin. I think even 40, it's still not enough. They're still gonna be broken. Anything above 50 or 60%, then yeah, sure, it's substantial. But 30-40% should be at least nerf on Prot Paladin to be, equal to most of their tanks. And they're gonna still be ahead, by the way. Guardian DPS, I feel like Guardian Druid lacks a bit of DPS. On the raid testing, they weren't doing good ST. So I wouldn't mind to see a small buff on regards to Guardian. Yeah. Windwalker. Okay, so I have a very specific buffs coming for Monk. I think Monk, once again, just like Outlaw Rogue, is extremely fun to play. But it just lacks that, AoE output, especially outside of cooldowns, and then mass AoE. So there's several things I propose for them to change. Obviously, I'm not a Monk main, neither I main monster class here, I main Air Shaman. But I think out of all of the gameplay that I've played so far, if Monk gets Spinning Crane Kick percentage multiplier by 25, for example, so that's going to make using Spinning Crane Kick after Festive Fury a lot more valuable. You are already doing this to utilize the tier set, and I feel like if they buff Spinning Crane Kick, you might be using that as well, in situations where you weren't otherwise using it. Or, for example, buff Jade Ignition, which is a talent that further buffs the usage of Spinning Crane Kick. It detonates Explosion. If that gets to be buffed significantly, then, kind of a semi-buff to Spinning Crane Kick, kind of a proxy buff to it. So I wouldn't really mind to see that either. So our buff percentage on Monk plus Spinning Crane Kick altogether is going to do very well for them. Restoration Druid HPS buff and DPS buff. I think Resto Druid currently lacks performance both in HPS and DPS, so yeah. It's quite evident in raiding, but it's also evident in Mythic Plus. That should probably get solved in the next couple weeks. Arcane Mage currently is doing very, very good. Both in Mythic Plus, which is one of the best DPS right now, and also in raid doing quite well. So I wouldn't be surprised to see an Arcane Mage nerf. Okay, no hate. I'm just, again, this is what I think is the most probable thing for them to happen. But let's see if it's gonna happen. Demon Warlock changes. I think Demonology Warlock is the only spec so far, or at least one of the few, that hasn't got one singular change on behalf of them for the past 5 weeks of tuning. Nothing. Just not a single line. Absolutely nothing. So I'm betting on them getting something. Their current performance is like slightly above average. The tier set is completely passive, doesn't change anything. You play the same old build as before, at least in the Mythic Plus. And, a little bit disappointed so far. So hope to see some changes swinging their way. Holy Paladin, I think they're going to be buffing Holy Shock again. Because their current build Mythic Plus, at least one of them, doesn't use Holy Shock, which is a super iconic ability for Paladin. And it's a full caster then. It's just casting all the time. Or you might use Holy Shock, but not as a priority, kind of like a filler, or if you have to move here and there. Overall, I think that's gonna help Holy Paladin a lot Mythic Plus if they get a substantial Holy Shock buff well, at least double-digit buff, what I think. Devourer DH. Okay, so currently Devourer DH has a problem, which I've spoke about many times. The current base build is playing Void Card, which is not an issue, but you play Void Card without Apex Talents, which makes you not cast ever Collapsing Star, even though you're speccing into Collapsing Star. Which is a gameplay that I actually I'm quite fond of, but it's degenerate. And what I think is going to happen is they are probably going to tune down or maybe tune up Collapsing Star just so you are forced to pick it up, right? That's kind of what I think is going to happen with Devourer DH, because they already got out of buff. That didn't work out well, so I think that makes the most sense for them going forward. Some Collapsing Star damage increase or Apex Talents buffs or anything just to compensate for the lack of, Collapsing Stars. Next in line is going to be Iron's Warrior. I think Iron's Warrior AoE is just crazy. Your offensive cooldowns are pretty much every 35 seconds when you demolish, right? Obviously, without the Avatar and Ravager. I'm just talking about like minor cooldowns. Iron's does insane damage right now in AoE, sustain and burst. Prot Paladin damage is also very good. The only issue with Iron's is just pure ST, no funnel. But there's very rare situations where that happens. Most of the time you have funnel. So no funnel, Iron's Colossus does feel a little bit icky, but the AoE part is like really, really good. I would love to see some AoE adjustments on arms, because right now it's a little bit out of control, especially the bleed build, which again, if you do play the artillery, whatever it's called, the bleed build, your deep wounds accounts for roughly as much as cleave, depending on how many mobs you play. So yeah. Shadow Priest changes. So what I think is going to happen right now is just because Shadow Priest is currently one of the best specs in Mythic Plus with Invoke Nightmare, which manually applies Shadow Word Pain in Mythic Plus. I don't think that's the intention. Blizzard wants to play Shadow Priest in Mythic Plus, although you did play that last season. I feel like they might just change Invoke Nightmare out application for Shadow Word Pain, and instead flatline buff Shadow Word Pain naturally, so you can play Misery build. Misery Arcane build in Mythic Plus is so good to play. It's so fun. Invoke Nightmare is just not fun. It's just not fun. Like everything about this spec is not fun if you play Invoke Nightmare. If you do play Misery, best spec. I predict BM and Survival Hunter to get no changes. Why I think that is because they both are within the average graph in Mythic Plus and in Raid. I think BM is definitely better in Survival and Raid, but by a tiny bit. So I don't think they're in a graph where they're critically need changes, but they're not also OP to get nerfed. So I think in between, that's why I don't think you're gonna see Hunter changes this time around. You might see MM Hunter changes, right? That's possible, but I don't think you're gonna see BM Survival. Maybe I'm wrong. Let's see. Frostbase changes, similar to Demolog. I've placed it here because there was nothing else to guess anymore. Frost is, I think the only change they got this season is that they got their Apex Talents nerf, which resulted in less of a burst, and instead they got more flat out damage increase by 4%, which gives you more sustained damage. Holy fuck, how do I remember everything here? I played too much WoW. So yeah, I think probably a Frost Mage coming out as a small change here, because also on a Warcraft logs, Frost Mage is the least tested spec so far, with altogether with Devastation Evoker as a skill commander. Yeah, so maybe some changes coming for them. Speaking about Death Evoker, I think Death Evoker buffs are imminent. Current performance is atrocious, both in Raid and Mythic Plus. I think Skill Commander Evoker for sure gets something. I don't know about Flame Shaper. Flame Shaper perhaps. I mean, I would love to get some changes also for Flame Shaper. Or general buffs on Evoker. I would love that. Yeah, I mean, so far, I think they need love. Okay, so Frost Death Knight, a lot of people think it will get nerfed. I think the opposite. I don't think they're gonna get touched so far. I think they are doing above average performer, like probably top 10 DPS right now, but there are other specs above them that are broken more than they are. So the only nerf that might occur to them might be a durability changes for Frost and Unholy, which I think the chance of that is already pretty slim. Because the later we get into the PTR, the more they just balance, DPS, HPS, etc. So, yeah, I feel like Frost Decay no changes here. Might be a little bit of a curveball, but we'll see. Augmentation buff. Oh, wow. Oh, wow, Petko, what have you done, dude? Well, here's my plan. because the last week the quality of life changes on Aug Evoker were really terrible. They nerf CDR, they nerf duplicates, so obviously damage goes low as well. I feel like they might compensate Augmentation Evoker with buffs coming out this one next week, because once again, this is one of the most played spec in the game. Just like Ret Paladin, I don't think they want them to be dead, so you might see some buffs coming their way. I don't know if big or small, but we're gonna find out. Disc Priest. So the reason why I believe Disc Priest might get a DPS nerf is because on raid testing, they had very high DPS, sometimes within a 100k sustained DPS, which is insane. But if you do nerf DPS, that means you directly nerf HPS. So what might happen to Disc Priest is get into less damage, but change the multiplier of Atonement once again. I think last week they changed it from 30% to 32. So you might see something like 32 to 35 or 36%, and then they just get DPS nerf, which means you do less damage overall in Mythic Plus in the rating, but HPS remains the same, which I don't think it would be a bad idea for them. They do so much ST though. Yeah. And last but not least, gonna be Balance Druid. I think Balance Druid will likely get no changes. They are doing really well in Mythic Plus so far, especially their Mass AoE is looking to be incredible. But when it comes down to raid, they are not overpowered. They're like good in some of the fights, like really good some of the fights, but I think there are other specs in front of you that are more of a candidate to get nerfed instead of you. So that's why I'm throwing a curveball on Balance and Frost Decay for no changes. And let's see how it's gonna go. Alright guys, that's pretty much what I think is gonna happen next week, or sorry, this week. Once again, this is like the likelihood of that happening. It's not like guaranteed. I don't work for Blizzard. I'm not an insider. I'm just a fan playing WoW. And I think what I just said here makes the most sense to make the game more balanced. Is it gonna happen though? Fuck do I know. But when it does, once again, I'm gonna make a video just like this one, discussing all of the class changes happening. And then at the end of the video, I am gonna be changing the bingo and seeing how well I did. So last time I got, I think 8 incorrect, 8-ish incorrect. Okay, maybe 9, whatever, 8, 9 out of 25, which is roughly, like between 66% to 70, right ratio. You guys do the math, I don't know, probability, whatever. If you have 8 wrong out of 25, I think that's like 1/3 almost. So yeah, I think like 70%-ish, give or take, 68 correct rate, which is pretty good. Anyway, let me know if you guys like this concept, if you guys like this idea of me doing this content. If you enjoy it, I will continue to do that until we get to the season, which should be August the 18th. Again, not confirmed. That's all. Much love. Thank you for watching, guys. And once again, I'll see you later. Hopefully tonight, if not tomorrow, or whenever there are changes. Bye for now.